The J. Michaels Show.
Welcome to this latest episode of The J. Michaels Show. I would like to take a moment to remind you to please subscribe to the show. Follow us. You can follow us on Spotify, on Apple Podcasts, on Good Pods, if you're listening only to audio. And if you're watching, then be sure to subscribe to us on YouTube. We really, really appreciate it when you hit those like buttons and you subscribe. So, our guest is Lyle Blackburn. He is the author of multiple books on cryptozoology, and he's here with us today. Let's say hello to Lyle. Hey, dude.
Hey, how's it going? Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm glad to have you on here. I wanted to ask you first off is, how did you get started interested in cryptozoology?
Well, it was kind of something that unfolded through life, really. As far back as I can remember, I was fascinated by movie monsters. I remember trying to watch everything on TV, Universal Monsters reruns, or the old show Dark Shadows, anything with monsters. And then in third grade, they used to pass around like an order form for scholastic books. And you could, pick the books, and your parents, these were books, so your parents would always buy that. So I got a book called Strange But True by Daniel Cohen. And it covered sort of some strange world mysteries, but a lot of monster stuff. And it had chapters on Bigfoot, Yeti, and the Loch Ness Monster. And that was the first time I had heard of those. And to me, it was almost like these are like monsters, but this is something that could exist in real life. People here are saying they saw it. So I was instantly intrigued by that. And then sometime in the 70s, my parents took me to a drive-in and we saw the movie The Legend of Boggy Creek.
Oh, yeah.
Which, was a very influential film as far as Bigfoot and cryptozoology. And that really did it for me because, whereas Nessie was way over in Scotland and the Yeti was far off, and even Bigfoot was in the Pacific Northwest. Well, I grew up in Fort Worth, Texas. So very far from where those creatures were. However, the alleged Boggy Creek monster, also called the Fouke monster, was said to live in this small town of Fouke, which was only about 3 hours from where I lived. So this sort of hit it home. And then from then it was basically just reading books on the subject and watching the show In Search Of and whatever documentaries there were, Patterson Gimlin film. And eventually I was writing for the magazine Rue Morgue, which is a widely circulated horror magazine, and I was covering cryptid related things for them. And I thought, man, I'd love to write a book. And I was like, what is my favorite subject? And I was like, The Legend of Boggy Creek. What is the true story behind that movie and the sightings? And so I just set out to write a book, mainly just for my own self, just discovery of that story. And when that was published in 2012, that sort of just set me on a new path of research and writing about cryptids.
Yeah, that, you mentioned that movie, The Legend of Boggy Creek. I think that was the movie that got us all hooked. I remember seeing it 1972 or 73 and being terrified that that thing could come to Mississippi, where I lived. So it sparked my interest in the subject as well. And I think that movie has really put a lot of people on the path of being interested in this creature. Do you agree?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, just, as I started going and speaking at Bigfoot conferences and doing book signings, I mean, I couldn't believe how many people came up to me and said, "Man, I saw that movie," or even saying my father showed me that movie, and that's really what did it for me, and that's why I'm into the subject. So it was just so influential. And I mean, even if you watch the movie now, it's interesting. I've noticed that the way they were reenacting the encounters, I mean, they used the director Charles B. Pierce used real people in Fouke, Arkansas that in some cases were the people that actually had the sighting. So it was sort of a reenactment with some narration overdub. And it's basically the same thing you see on these cable television shows when they do reenactments like Finding Bigfoot or whatever cryptid show. So it really set the bar and of what we would see in the future, you know.
Yeah, he as a director was phenomenal in that he would do these scary parts, and then they would cut to like this really upbeat song that sort of lulled you back into being comfortable, and then suddenly it's scary again. And he was great at that. It was a production wonder, and like you say, it set the standard for a lot of monster movies since then. You go into the field and you do research yourself. You go into swamps and such as that. What is the scariest thing that has happened to you so far doing research?
Well, you know, there's a number of things that have happened over the years, and certainly one thing I like about this kind of research is I've always been an outdoorsman. My father was an avid bow hunter, so as far back as I could remember, we were in the woods, and you know, the woods at night get spooky, especially when you're a little kid. So I just appreciated nature, and I kind of appreciated that spooky aspect, which, of course, was heightened in the Legend of Boggy Creek. And so, over the years, you know, I've always, when I write a book about a case, I go to that area. I, you know, obviously interview people, but go into the woods. And so, man, some of the scariest stuff I would say has happened in the Boggy Creek area. One particular scary incident was when myself and a friend of mine were canoeing up what's called Mercer Bayou. And I mean, this is just a typical looking swamp, and it's like after midnight, and we're the only two people out there for miles and miles and miles, very, very remote even still. And we hear this sort of howl come up out of the woods. And, you know, when you're paddling along in these canoes at night, there's ambient noise like insects and frogs, and you're kind of hitting the side of the canoe. When we heard that, we just stopped, and so did everything else. It got quiet.
Wow.
I'm like, man, was that like the weirdest coyote or you've ever heard? And he said, I don't think that was a coyote. Well, fortunately, about 45 seconds later, this thing howled again, and then we could truly hear it because now we're sitting still, and it sounded big, and it was like a roaring howl that like something we've never heard. And in fact, my partner there that did the research, he had done a lot of stuff in Mississippi as well. He had some survival training. He was a woodsman, and so we both had a good handle on what you might hear in the woods. But anyway, you know, the hair on the back of your neck stands up. You're out there in the middle of nowhere, and then it does it again. This thing howled, and we were just captivated. So obviously we didn't see it, and we're in the boat, so we had been going pretty far. So we head back down to where we were camped, which was up on a hill. You know, you kind of have to camp the high ground in those bayous. And we had no sooner got that canoe out and gone up on that hill, all of a sudden we hear that same howl, but this time it is right there where we got out of the water.
Wow.
And, you know, it always catches you off guard. He was trying to get out a recorder to record it. I grabbed a flashlight and ran down that hill just trying to see what it was so I could, you know, get a visual. And whatever it was just on the other side of that deep bayou channel, and it took off running. And I didn't see it, but it howled again from further back in the woods. And I mean, this was really close to us. Very scary. I was kind of glad it was on the other side of that channel. And then it just ran again and howled once more in the distance and ran off. But the spooky thing about it is we thought, man, once we heard that howl up and we started back, you know, we were talking and we were all heightened up, so we were making noise. It's possible that the thing heard us and followed us down the channel and then howled at us. So pretty scary.
Wow. So, have you ever actually seen a Bigfoot?
I believe I have. There's been a couple of times when I was like that, when I thought I was close, but there's been two times when I actually saw something, and those two times were also in that Boggy Creek area. I mean,
Hmm.
I've been there the most. I mean, I go there very frequently. So the basically the sighting that I had, the best sighting was last year. I had gone up there with myself, my girlfriend, and another research partner that I go out with a lot.
Hmm.
And we were going back and hiking in the late afternoon along this very swampy lake that kind of sits close to the Sulphur River bottoms in the Sulphur River. And we were kind of going around the edge of this, and it gets very remote. And we were just walking and walking. And we had walked probably about 3 hours hiking back there, just looking for tracks and looking for stuff, not necessarily expecting to see anything, but
Yeah.
it's nice and it's tranquil back there and spooky. And they were behind me about 15 yards, and I saw a game trail. And I'd been kind of going through a bunch of the mucky swamp and thought, oh, here's a clear path, So I
Uh
just
huh.
walked up it for no real reason. And I heard what sounded like footsteps.
Oh, wow.
And so that got my attention. I turn, and about 30 yards away, I see what I first take is a leg coming out from behind some brush where there was some thicker trees. I saw a leg. I saw another leg,
Hmm.
and my mind thought, well, there's a hog over here because it was dark. But then within a second, I see the full figure walking upright. It walked between that clear area for about 3 or 4 seconds before it went from behind some brush.
Hmm.
And in that time period, you see something walking upright, you think, well, there's a person, which was kind of spooky. But as I looked at it, I'm like, that's not a person. It was uniformly very dark, black in color, no clothing, nothing like that. No human elements. And I realized what I'm looking at is quite possibly this creature that so many others had reported.
Wow.
And so at that point, I had two choices. One, I either just run after it, like I've been prone to do, or go tell my associates there about it so that hopefully they could see it and sort of corroborate what I had seen. So I took the second option and went over there and tried to get their attention and tell them as fast as I could I had seen something walking down off this area where it drops off back into the thick area.
Hmm.
And we all started down there looking for it, and we never found it. Whatever that was probably heard me as I had to go down there and tell them what's up, and it went in some direction we couldn't tell. We didn't find any footprints, and that was it. We never saw it again.
Wow. Wow. So, what was your second encounter? You said there were two times.
The first one wasn't as good of a look, and I can't say 100% just what it was,
Hmm.
but I was down in this was not where I had the first sighting. This was further down, closer to where we had the howl incident.
Hmm.
On one occasion, I was down there, and it was during the late afternoon as well, or somewhat at the same time as I had the sighting, but I was standing and looking across this. There's a watery area where you can't cross because it's deep and there's a lot of alligators in there. And something caught my eye going between some trees, and it was very red in color.
Hmm.
And where I'm looking, I've been down there so many times. I've never seen a person over there. It's not private land. No one owns that. And to get over there, you need a boat. People don't really hike back there. I mean, you might see Bigfooters, or in hunting season, you might see hunters, but you don't see people just, there's no hiking or whatever.
Right.
I see this red thing cross between this open area and go behind the brush. And this was probably 60 or 70 yards away, a much further distance. I couldn't tell exactly what it was, but here's the thing. We had been up in the town of Fouke at this place called the Monster Mart where people gather. And I'm not kidding you. 20 minutes before we had come down to the bayou, I talked to a local who said he had seen what he believed was the creature running across one of the roads in front of his car, and he said to him it looked very much like an orangutan. He said the thing had a reddish or orangish fur, and it was big, not an orangutan, but it had those colorations. And so I see this big red thing walking between those trees. I can only presume it might have been the creature, but I just didn't see enough of it, and it wasn't close enough to say 100% on that one.
Wow. Wow, those are incredible stories and creepy encounters. And, I've seen two things. I won't go into it, but it really just makes your skin crawl. It runs up your spine when you see something like that.
Yeah, it's always unexpected. You can think about what you might do in those situations, and you're going to get a picture and you're going to do all this stuff, and it happens so fast and so unexpected. I mean, I had my phone in my pocket, and it has a camera. It's an iPhone, but you're just engrossed by the moment, and then the thing is out of sight, and that's the way these encounters go. And then you're yeah, it's just the chill runs up your spine, and then you're trying to man, I think I just saw that creature that so many people have reported, and that's it's well, it's life changing in a way. Especially some people can react very emotionally to this. For me, it was just pure excitement and like that spooky but great spooky feeling.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. So you started writing books. What was your first book, and how many books do you have out there now?
So the Beast of Boggy Creek was the first book, and that was, I started researching that around 2009. It was published in 2012, and then following that, the reception to the book was so good, which I didn't have any idea would happen. I thought, well, man, this is great. I should continue. So I thought, I love these sort of swampy monster cases where a whole town was affected, sort of like in the Legend of Boggy Creek. So I went out to Bishopville, South Carolina, and did research on a creature known as the lizard man that had been reported in the late 80s. And I know you're familiar with that. And it's just another fascinating case where you had a whole bunch of witnesses reporting sightings. You had a creepy creature. You had law enforcement involved, and the media, just a crazy circus. So the Lizard Man was my second book. My third was called Beyond Boggy Creek, and that was sort of an in-depth look at the history of Bigfoot sightings in the Deep South. Because, I mean, the Legend of Boggy Creek may be the most famous and what people think of, but people don't really realize that there's a lot of other really intriguing cases all throughout the South over the years. So that was an opportunity for me to kind of go beyond Boggy Creek and explore the others. Then I wrote a book on Momo, the Missouri Monster, which it was too much to really fit into my Beyond Boggy Creek case, my Beyond Boggy Creek book. And the Momo case is another sort of crazy 1970s wild, the whole town, the posses going after it. And I love those cases. And then I did one called Sinister Swamps, which looks at notorious swamps across North America that have a long history of paranormal sightings. So in that book, I just was more geography based. Like I could talk about the Everglades, Okefenokee Swamp, Honey Island Swamp, anything like that, and just sort of included anything that was weird, bizarre, from whether it was ghosts or cryptids or, voodoo or missing people, whatever it was, because swamps are just my thing, I guess, and spooky. And I did a case book on the Boggy Creek monster, in which I just kind of distilled it to the actual encounters. It's just here's all the sightings. I wrote a book on the history of Texas Bigfoot, and so I'm from Texas, so I thought, well, it's only appropriate that I write a Texas Bigfoot book.
Right.
People had asked me about that, and people probably don't realize that Texas has a long history of very credible sightings and some really great Bigfoot cases, especially in the eastern portion in the Piney Woods.
Right.
And then let's see, my latest book is The Lake Worth Monster, which talks about a case from Lake Worth, which is just outside of Fort Worth, that happened back in the late 60s and into the 70s, in which people were reporting this sort of white-haired goat man slash Bigfoot creature, where again, you had, all sorts of manner of media coverage and the police involvement and all other things. That's the closest to me. I only live like 20 minutes from Lake Worth, but it was a little before my time as far as knowing about that. I didn't know about it till after the Legend of Boggy Creek, but sort of my hometown monster.
So, do you have anything new that you're writing right now? Something that's going to come out soon?
Well, I don't have anything where I know have a projected completion date. It's just it's always hard. The more I do this, the harder it is to decide what to do next.
Right.
Honestly. So, but I have been working on something that revolves around the Big Thicket in Texas, and it's some mysterious reports, which are cryptid related and otherwise very mysterious cases. And I've always been fascinated with the Big Thicket. My family is from East Texas, and that was always a place I knew about as a kid. So that's kind of what I've been working on, but at no real deadline pace.
Yeah. Have you ever been to the Pacific Northwest and looked for Sasquatch up there?
I've been my main career has been a musician, along with the writing over the years. So I've been to the Pacific Northwest many times, but I've never really gone out there to any extent and done any investigations. I mean, I've been to wooded areas and stayed overnight and done some stuff, but haven't really done a lot of research. And of course, it is kind of ground zero for Bigfoot, and a place I would like to spend more time in. But it almost seems like there's so many mysteries down here in our part of the country that you just can't. There's too many places.
Yeah, there's plenty to do here rather than go all the way up there. What is your take on the famous Patterson-Gimlin color film from 1967 that they claim to be a Bigfoot? What's your thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, it's certainly iconic and one of those things that influenced me a great deal when I first saw that, probably in the 70s. And, when I saw that as a kid, you just take it at face value. You don't have the mind of research. And I remember it scared me when I saw it. I was like, oh, I mean, I imagine being out hunting and I saw that big thing walk by that it scared me. But over the years, I've tried to look at it objectively, and I'm kind of split between, I understand the skeptics, but I also, it's hard to completely rule it out or shoot holes in it, because it holds up even with digital scrutiny and all manner of technology that Roger Patterson would have never imagined. And I think for me, also, the one thing that leads me to lean on the side that is truly shows a real creature is that I've gotten to know Bob Gimlin very well over the years, and I've spent a lot of time with him, and he just still tells the story as it is and as he always has, and I don't feel like he had no reason to really not. If it would have been a hoax, why wouldn't he say anything? Because he really got cut out of any sort of monetary gain, and in fact, he kind of ruined his life, to be honest, until later people like at Bigfoot conferences began to embrace him and realize he was iconic. But knowing Bob and stuff, I've just got to take it at the word of my friend, and I believe it truly could be a creature that we're looking at in that film. But ultimately, there's really no way to prove it. I mean, there's only what we have in those scant frames and the minute of footage. That's it. There is, unless somebody comes forward with something more substantial to prove it, not just hearsay. I think it's left to be a mystery that will be debated forever.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I've often said that it's 50% real, it's 50% fake. It's whichever you believe. That is what it
Yeah.
is. But Bigfoot, you mentioned Bigfoot conferences. For someone who's never been to a conference, what would someone expect to see there, and what's it like to go and speak at a conference?
Well, I remember going to one of these conferences around 2009 was the first time I realized there was any such thing. And I went there and I remember as a first timer, I was just floored by what at the time was some very credible speakers that were talking about this subject in various presentations. And man, it was mind blowing. And also to meet people in person that claim to have seen one of these creatures. So I think they're good. I mean, I see people criticizing myself and others for speaking at these conferences or attending them, saying that, this is what we're doing. We should be in the woods. It's like, hey, I'm in the woods too, just as much, and I've spent a lifetime. But what you get at these conferences is when you meet like-minded individuals and you talk about these subjects, oftentimes it gives me ideas, research ideas. Of course, I meet people in person that have witnessed these creatures, and I can really judge the credibility of a person if I meet them in person.
Right.
And every time I log a sighting, it just is something that kind of keeps me fired up about the subject. Even if I didn't see what they saw, just hearing it first person from them. So I think they're good for that, and just to get around like-minded people. And hey, Bigfoot and cryptids, and it's all fun. So why not have some fun with it? And that doesn't preclude anybody from going out and doing hardcore research all they want. But I think somebody that attends one of these, I think if you have any passion for the subject, you will be blown away at how much you will learn by listening to presenters and just literally talking to the people you meet there and hearing their encounters or their experiences. It's really a great. These events are really great.
And if somebody goes to one of those and you're there, you have your books there, you have a booth, you sign, you autograph. So this is something that not only do they get the knowledge and the learning, but they also get to meet you.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's sort of the thing that I never really expected or thought of when I started writing the book. Because when I started writing Beast of Boggy Creek, it was like I was just doing it to learn myself. And then it was such a reward when people enjoyed the book, they bought the book, and they come up to me and said, "Man, I love the book," and they buy another book. That is an opportunity I don't think a lot of authors get, because I have these places where I can go and there's people who, enjoy reading my books and the books by my colleagues. So yeah, it's really great to experience. And these are people who are fans of the stuff I'm writing about and passionate about it as well. So it's just a great experience, and again, keeps you fired up to keep going and researching and writing, because this stuff takes, as you well know, this kind of stuff takes a lot of hours
Right.
to do.
Yeah, yeah. Well, we'll put links to all your books and your website and such so people can keep up with new things that's going on with Lyle Blackburn. But let's shift gears now, because you mentioned earlier that you're also a musician. And I want you to tell me about your band and what kind of music you do and like, and just talk about your band and promote it a little.
So yeah, I guess that's my concurrent career path.
Uh huh.
monsters and music, and that's mostly what it's been throughout my life. And I was in bands back as far as junior high, and I'd say when I was in my early 20s, I joined a band called Solitude Eternus, which was a doom metal band, and we were signed to Roadrunner Records, and we got to tour, a lot of the world, and that was a great experience. And but the band that I've been in or had I suppose the most success with over a long period of time is called Ghoultown, and Ghoultown is sort of a dark Western, sort of a Johnny Cash meets Rob Zombie type rock and
Yeah.
roll thing. It's really hard to describe because you just have to hear it, but it's very like has some spaghetti western overtones, and it's dark. It's got punk and metal and old school country. Just sort of put everything I love in a blender because I was raised in Fort Worth, Texas. So,
Right.
first thing was country. Then then rock and roll, radio rock, and then I discovered punk rock and metal. And so I love a little bit of all of this stuff, and I also love spaghetti western soundtracks. Ennio Morricone, who wrote the iconic scores for like the Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, for a few
Hmm.
dollars more, all those are very influential. So Ghoultown just sort of throws that all in a blender, and this year is the 26th year that band has been going, and we've got 10 albums. We've toured all over and been on horror movie soundtracks and all sorts of stuff, and it's been a lot of fun. I did that on my own label when I was on signed to Roadrunner Records and signed on labels before. We got to go a lot of places. We didn't seem to see any money.
Yeah.
But ironically, that band, I did 4 albums with them way back, starting in the late 80s and into the 90s. And I left the group, and the music, I think, is now sold to Warner Brothers or someone else. They reissue it. I don't see any money, but the band has become popular over the years. So the demands for the original lineup to play these huge festivals, these huge heavy metal festivals, has come our way. So I've been doing that, and so I'm about to head over to Germany in a week to play headline a huge metal festival over there with Solitude Eternus. So it's crazy that band. I mean, I left that band 30 years ago.
Wow.
As
Wow. Do you play a musical instrument, or do you just sing, or what do you do in the band?
well, with Solitude, I played bass guitar
Hmm.
and I did not sing. With Ghoultown, I play electric guitar and I'm the vocalist. So I can play anything. I can even play drums. I used to play way back. I started on drums, so I can pretty much play anything if it can be plucked or hit.
Well, on top of having a band and doing your research out in the woods and author of all of these books, you also have a podcast. Tell me about your podcast.
Yes, I sort of do. It's called Monstro Bizarro, and the podcast sort of came from people asking about this for years because there's a film company out of Ohio called Small Town Monsters. People may be familiar with the productions. They're cryptid documentaries directed by Seth Breedlove and some of the other guys that work for him now. But I've narrated like 10 of their productions. So that was my voice, and people would say you should do a podcast. I'm like, when do I fit that into my schedule? But
Right.
I I tried. I've done that, and so I produced like I think 19 episodes or 20 episodes over the last couple of years, and it's not an interview format like this. I
Right.
tried to do something a little different. I mean, there's so many good interview format already, so I just sort of it's sort of a an audio book of a case, or like I'll talk about a certain cryptid or look into some cases and I narrate all that. So it's a little different kind of podcast, but people really enjoy it, and I just can't even produce them fast enough, actually.
Do you have more of an interest in Bigfoot or cryptozoology in general?
Well, I kind of like all of it in general. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, I like Bigfoot, and of course, that's sort of the granddaddy of all. But I almost like the more obscure, weird sightings and weird creatures. I mean, I wrote the book on the lizard man, and I love the Mothman and all manner of these really spooky cases. And especially if I get one or two sighting reports of just something that's just a very credible sighting, but it's just like, man, that's scary. Or how do we define that? I love those rare ones. It just seems like there's so much Bigfoot, and I
Mm-hmm.
love my Bigfoots to have a little southern flavor, like
Right.
Boggy Creek or skunk apes or something that's got this sort of more dangerous or spooky reputation. I kind of like that about the southern cases.
Do you think that there is a difference between the, shall we say, the skunk ape, swamp apes, to the Sasquatch in the Pacific Northwest, or are they all the same creature?
Yeah, that's something that I pondered and over the years, and especially when I was writing Beyond Boggy Creek, I have a whole chapter on the Florida sightings, whether
Mm-hmm.
you call it skunk ape or Bigfoot. And I really tried to discern the descriptions. Are we describing something that's so completely different than what's in the Pacific Northwest? And what I found was that it's kind of a mix.
Mm-hmm.
And descriptions of these creatures are not very consistent, and they don't necessarily suggest that there's such a unique difference between the two. I think that when people, and I can speak for myself, when you see something and you don't see it very long, it's not just standing there taking a glamour photo.
Right.
You assess the information with what seconds you have to see it or whatever, and so that lends itself to the descriptions being the interpretation of people. Was it 7 foot tall or was it 8 foot? Well,
Right.
you know, it's hard to say. So I think there are some differences in the southern variety, and I think that may be due to the environment.
Right.
If we presume these creatures are anything related flesh and blood, and they've lived in these places, well, if you live in the mountains of the Pacific Northwest, your environment demands a different body type than if you live in a southern swamp. So I
Right.
think there could be adaptations where the ones in the south are a little more primate-like. They could be a little smaller, just more hairy or skunky or smelly. That only makes sense because if you look at Bergman's law, which suggests that animals who live in colder environments or more in the north are usually bigger than the same animals living in the south, such as bears, it could apply to Sasquatch. And I think that's why we have some discrepancies in description. But whether those are two distinctly different creatures, it's hard to say.
Do you think that the Pacific Northwest Sasquatch can drop to all fours like the southern version is often described doing?
I, you know, at least in my research, I haven't found as many sighting reports in the Pacific Northwest where people say they drop to all fours,
Mm-hmm.
unless maybe they're moving up an incline or a steep embankment, of course. But I do get those in the South where people say, it ran in front of our car across a dirt road and it was going on all fours. So I think that now I don't know why they would go back and forth because anatomy doesn't necessarily, it kind of specializes, but hey, they got to do what they got to do. And maybe they have adapted to quadruped and biped motion that can be, propel them along how they need to. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I think the ones in the South probably drop to all fours more, if not more exclusive than the northern ones.
The one that I saw in Louisiana, it was on all fours and it did this sort of a push pull motion. It would put its
Mm.
arms out and touch the ground flat handed and pull. and its knees were bent up to its side with its feet flat on the ground and doing the kind of a pushing, pulling motion. It did that very quickly as it ran across a cut through, and I never saw it stand up. But for the longest, I wondered what it was, if it could even be a Bigfoot. And then I heard more stories and people validating that that isn't
Yeah.
exactly what they do. So, your thoughts on whether or not they are physical or supernatural or some kind of primate? What do you think Bigfoot is?
Well, that's another debate that's really excels as we go forward without having proved them. So, when I first was exposed to this, you didn't think anything else about it. Bigfoot was just some undiscovered species of ape or relic hominid that lived in the woods, and that was it. And I mean, I like that romantic view of it. It's like, when you're an explorer and there's this animal out there or creature that you can find, you can take a picture. Over the years, though, as I've seen, it's gotten more extreme in people's theories, a little bit more towards interdimensional or they're supernatural or they're extraterrestrials. And that seems to only be natural because, well, no one's proved it. So nobody can really say in truth what they are. But, I think we got to remember not to underestimate creatures of the world, creatures in the woods. I mean, what we may interpret as supernatural, it just stepped away and it disappeared. Well, that's what animals do. I mean, if you go try to hunt a tiger, it has stripes, and those stripes aren't to make us go wow in the zoo. Those stripes are to break up its form so that it can just move behind that grass. One minute you see it, the next minute you don't know where it is. It's gone.
Natural
And
camouflage.
yeah, it's natural camouflage, and that's I mean, and even if you want to think about other things like octopus. Like octopus is just those creatures have, I mean, almost scary intelligence, and habits and the way they do things. Hey, we can't put it past nature to have amazing things, and certainly Bigfoot could be one of those. So I don't necessarily jump to far-fetched conclusions, but at the same time, hey, it could be anything. I mean, Native Americans have talked about spirit animals for long before we were here. We don't necessarily understand even the physics of our own world. Everything is always changing as science goes forward. So, I just have an open mind, and I don't really, as long as people don't try to tell me what to believe, I'm totally open to whatever opinion they have because nobody can prove it until such time as they can. All theories are valid.
Right. What do you think would prove the existence of a Bigfoot in America?
Well, I think at this point it's going to take a body because, I mean, first there was, digital cameras, then there was CGI, now we got AI. So the more technology goes, the easier it is to fabricate stuff. I mean, and I think even if you had like, man, I just got this great footage of a Bigfoot and you filmed it like Patterson Gimlin, if you put that online now, everybody's just going to say either they'll believe it because they just emotionally believe it, but most people will probably say, "Oh, that's just CGI. Somebody's it's trickery." So,
Right.
Unfortunately, and I don't advocate trying to shoot one or anything. That's not my. That wouldn't be what I would recommend. I just think that in today's age with today's technology, nothing short of just somebody having one, boom, here you go, is going to ultimately and decisively prove it.
Wow. Yeah, I agree with that. What do you think of the chances are someone would find a dead one in the woods?
Well, you would think by now somebody would have. And the only way I can explain that, especially because that's almost the first thing a skeptic asks, is, well, how come there's no bones or body? Well,
Right.
That's not to say a hunter hasn't come walked by some smelly carcass, and if he didn't see the head or maybe a distinguishing part of the hand, what's he going to do? Pick it up? I mean, he could very well say, "Oh, it was some dead animal," and walk on. So, you know, and the thing is, there could be a very small population of these to be viable enough to survive. I mean, you go back to the cliche of, well, when's the last time you found bear bones in the woods? Well, I've never found any, and I've been hunting in various states and doing field research for many years. Though, take Falk or Boggy Creek for example. I've gotten two pictures of bears that people have seen there. Well, it's obviously a bear, but I've never seen a dead bear.
Right.
So we can't rule out just because we don't have the body, we can't, say that disproves Bigfoot. It's just, it seems like we would have one, but hey, maybe luck is on their side. Maybe they bury their bodies. Who knows? I mean, it just so far we haven't been able to, get one.
Yeah. Well, just quickly, also, since we're on the subject of this, the Loch Ness Monster, real or not real?
Well, I'm kind of leaning towards at this point we probably have disproved it with science, because we have eDNA and we have sonar. I mean, that is a finite area. Now it is underwater and there is room for error, but I don't know. Unfortunately, most things lead to that it could not be a plesiosaur. It couldn't host those creatures, and they probably could not come in there from the ocean. There is a slim chance, but pretty much
Right.
you can rule that out. And with the eDNA and other stuff, you just start to lose hope. I mean, of course, when I was a kid, I mean, you just took it at face value, and it's totally cool. And we can't say there's not. But I would lean, if I had to put my money on it, I would probably go on the side of it's not a reality.
Is there any lake monster that you think might be real?
Well, I mean, I think there's been a lot of research in Loch Ness over the years. There is similar cases like Lake Champlain where you have Champ.
Right.
I think there's still a possibility something's in there because it hasn't been researched as much with so many TV shows that have a lot deep pockets and the budgets and sonar and all this other stuff, know. So I think I would say Champ is still a possibility. Ogopogo is a pretty credible case. I even personally know people who have had sightings there, and they're credible folks. So I think, yeah, there's still hope that there's a lake or loch monster somewhere out there.
You've also done a lot of these TV documentaries. Do you have any favorites that you've been on?
Well, oddly enough, I love doing The Unexplained with William Shatner because I think they do a great job. Like, I'm a fan of the show, and just to be able to, they did a Fouke Monster episode where I talked about Boggy Creek. It's amazing to be on there and to talk about that. But as far as one that was really fun was when I did an episode of Shipping Wars, which is kind of a weird one. But they did a sort of a cryptid themed episode where they were transporting the Minnesota Iceman, if you will, from Minnesota to a museum in Austin, Texas, owned by my friend Steve Boosty. It's the Museum of the Weird in Austin. And they wanted to stop off and have the truck driver go on a Bigfoot hunt in Fouke, Arkansas. So they got myself and Ken Gerhardt and a couple of our associates to take that girl out in the woods. And, I mean, we were like, okay, let's try to scare this girl. I mean, this is Legend of Boggy Creek, man. She'll believe in Bigfoot by the end of this. And it was a really fun experience because she was spooked. We went out there at night and we sat out there, and I just thought it was hilarious. It was fun to be on, participate in this. It was, more action. And here's the weird part of it though. And I talk about this in my Boggy Creek casebook. When we were filming that, the film crew is all kind of chuckles and, yucking it up about Bigfoot and stuff. And as the late afternoons, the sun starts going down because we're going to shoot the main stuff at night. And one of the cameramen had been out in the woods filming what's called B-roll,
Right.
like he's filming some trees and a creek or whatever to run behind to cut in there. And he comes running back up there, and he was spooked out because he had seen something and he had got it on camera.
Oh, wow.
Now, I didn't know at the time what he had seen, but when he ran up there, all of a sudden, the whole film crew they were kind of milling about in the woods. All of a sudden, they're over there by the truck. I was like, what's going on? Then one of them, and somebody said one of them saw something. I go, well, there you go. You don't spend time in Boggy Creek country without that happening. And so I ended up talking to that guy later, and he said he saw some upright, huge figure running through the woods that he got on film.
Wow.
I mean, he said it was moving kind of fast and he didn't get the best shot of it, but he said it was on that film and he said it freaked him out. And that's why he went back out of the woods at that point. Now, when you look at the episode, you do not see that footage. Now, whether he has no idea because he doesn't edit it, it just gets turned over to the editing department at the network or
Right.
the production company. I mean, perhaps it's on film and they just didn't know or care or whatever, but it's not in the episode.
Wow. Wow.
Crazy.
Oh, that's amazing. I would love to see that footage. I hope
I
that
know,
it's
I
out there
know.
somewhere. I hope he can get his hands on it and release it. Do you have any speaking engagements coming up? Something you can talk about where you're going to be? Someone could go and meet you and talk to you, grab a book, and get an autograph?
Absolutely. I got a slew of them coming up. Let's see, June 7th, I'll be at the Cryptids and Paranormal Fest in Perth Amboy, New Jersey.
Mm-hmm.
So this is a first I've been to New Jersey before, but never spoken at a conference. So that ought to be good. I'll be out on June 13th. I'll be out in the little town of Red River, New Mexico, doing a free presentation there in that little town. And then June 25th, June 26th through 28th, I'll be at the really huge West Virginia Bigfoot Festival in Sutton, West Virginia. So that's a bigger one, like a street festival meets Bigfoot conference. So that's a good one. And also I'll be in August, the 22nd and 23rd, I'll be at the Pennsylvania Bigfoot Camping Adventure in Farmington, Pennsylvania.
Eric Altman, yeah.
Eric, yeah, I look forward to that. So, I mean, there's a bunch of others, but if people are interested in finding out where these are or finding out the information, they can go to my website at lyleblackburn.com, and I've got a list of those with the links to the tickets and info, and that way, yeah, you can come out to one of these events. They're super fun, and we can hang out and talk about cryptids.
Well, Lyle, thank you so much for being my guest. I've really enjoyed talking to you about all of the cryptozoology stuff because I'm fascinated with the subject. I'm fascinated with your books and everything. Once again, where would someone find one of your books if they're looking for it?
So you can get, I pretty much have all of them in stock right now, autographed copies from my web store. So if you go to lyleblackburn.com, it's got a link to my shop there. And of course, you can get these on Amazon as well. And those come in paperback and ebook, and even some of them even come in hardback. So, yeah, pretty much order from me or Amazon.
And is your band playing anywhere around Texas or around the country later this year?
Let's see. We've played a couple of times. Ghoultown will be playing in Dallas, Texas on June the 20th.
Mm-hmm.
So right in between all those other travels, June's going to be a killer month. You come out to the shows and see if I'm still alive.
All right, Lyle. Well, thank you so much again for being my guest. We really appreciate it, and we will see you next time on The J. Michael Show.
Thanks for having me. It was awesome.
Goodbye.